Snowflakes tumbled like tiny stars outside the cafe window, each one melting against the glass before she could catch its pattern. Emily Ward, CEO of a luxury tech company, had built her life around order, precision, and control, everything that love was not. She didn't believe in blind dates. But tonight wasn't about belief, it was about a dare. Her assistant had challenged her at the office Christmas party. One date, Emily. One human connection before the year ends. Now, wrapped in her favorite white coat, she found herself sitting in a quiet corner, sipping cocoa instead of her usual espresso, waiting for a stranger who was already 15 minutes late. She almost stood to leave when the door opened, and a gust of snow followed a man inside, a man shaking off the cold, laughing as he struggled to close his umbrella. The city glittered under its first true winter storm, every streetlight haloed in swirling snow. Emily Ward's driver had offered to wait outside the cafe, but she waved him off with a curt, "I won't be long." Truthfully, she didn't expect to last 10 minutes. Blind dates were ridiculous, messy, unpredictable, and time-consuming. And if there was one thing Emily despised, it was losing control of her schedule. She checked her watch for the third time, her reflection caught faintly in the cafe window. Sleek bun, perfect red lipstick, a tailored ivory coat that screamed CEO even off-duty. Everything about her was curated, deliberate. Even this date had started as a joke, an office dare during their Christmas party. Her assistant, Madison, had cornered her between rounds of champagne and carols. "You run a company that makes people connect online," she'd teased. "When was the last time you connected with anyone offline?" The table had erupted in laughter, and before Emily could argue, Madison had pulled out her phone and signed her up for a holiday blind date experience. Emily had rolled her eyes, assuming she'd find an excuse later. But tonight, with the company quiet for the holidays and her penthouse too empty to face, the dare didn't seem so ridiculous. Maybe, she thought, a cup of cocoa wouldn't kill her. Inside, the cafe glowed with golden light. Strings of silver tinsel hung between shelves of gingerbread cookies and pine-scented candles. A child by the window pressed his nose to the glass, watching snow fall like magic dust. The air smelled of cinnamon and coffee beans, the kind of warmth that reminded her of childhood before business plans replaced Christmas lists. She settled into a corner booth, removed her gloves, and wrapped her hands around a steaming mug. It was absurdly comforting. The minutes ticked by. No one approached her table. She caught herself scanning the door every time it opened, an unfamiliar feeling of nervous anticipation stirring in her chest. "This is why I don't do this," she muttered, straightening her coat. She thought about leaving, about retreating to her silent penthouse and drafting next quarter's presentation slides. But then a voice from the counter laughed, rich and familiar, cutting through the cafe hum. Emily froze. It couldn't be. She turned, and there he was, shaking snow from his dark hair, smiling at the barista as if he belonged to this cozy, imperfect world. Nathan Cole, her ex-CFO. The man who had walked out of her company, and her trust, without a backward glance. Her pulse quickened. Of all the people in the city, why him? Nathan's arrival felt like a scene written by fate, or a very cruel joke. Emily sat frozen, her fingers tightening around her cocoa mug as if it could steady her heartbeat. He hadn't changed much in a year. The same dark, tousled hair, the same confident ease that had once made him her most promising executive, and her biggest professional frustration. He was the kind of man who smiled at chaos, who called late-night work an adventure, who believed emotion had a place in business. She had disagreed, of course. Passion was a liability. Passion made people leave. When his eyes finally met hers, recognition flashed. Emily Ward. His voice held surprise, amusement, and just a hint of something softer. She exhaled slowly, trying to compose herself. "You've got to be kidding," she said, half under her breath. Nathan's grin widened as he approached, shaking the snow from his coat. "Apparently not. You're my blind date." She straightened, slipping easily into her executive calm. "Seems the universe, or someone, has a strange sense of humor." He chuckled, hanging his scarf on the chair opposite her. "For the record, my sister set this up. She said it was time I met someone before I turned into a workaholic hermit." His tone was teasing, but his eyes searched hers, measuring her reaction. Emily allowed a small, practiced smile. "A tragic fate," she replied dryly. Good thing you're not one already. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. The tension cracked, if only a little. They ordered dinner. Holiday soup and toasted sandwiches, and, at first, the conversation stayed safely neutral. The weather, the cafe's music, his family's Christmas traditions. But slowly, their walls began to lower. She asked about his consulting business. He admitted it was less stressful than the corporate grind. He asked if she'd ever taken a real vacation. She pretended not to hear him and changed the subject to holiday travel chaos. Then came the silence. Thick, familiar, charged. Nathan looked at her across the table, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You haven't changed, he said quietly. Still trying to control the world one spreadsheet at a time. Her eyebrow lifted. And you still think you can charm your way through it? Maybe, he said, leaning back, but I'm starting to think charm might be exactly what you need. For a moment, she forgot the years, the arguments, the professional rivalry that had once divided them. The cafe's soft light caught the snowflakes melting on his collar, and something inside her, something she'd buried beneath ambition and late nights, shifted. It wasn't romantic yet, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning neither of them had expected. Dinner stretched longer than either of them planned. What began as polite conversation turned into laughter that filled the small cafe like music. Outside, the snow thickened, painting the world in white silence, but inside, time felt suspended. Emily, who usually checked her watch between courses, found herself forgetting it existed. Nathan leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes bright with mischief. So tell me, he said, stirring the foam of his hot chocolate, is it true you banned Christmas carols at the office? She smirked, feigning offense. I didn't ban them. I limited them. There's a difference. Productivity drops 20% when people start singing during meetings. Or maybe it rises when people are happy, he countered with a grin. Spoken like a man who never had to balance a fourth-quarter budget while someone sings, Jingle Bells, off-key in accounting. Nathan burst out laughing, and Emily couldn't help but join him. It startled her, the sound of her own laughter, real, unrestrained, echoing in the warm air. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd simply enjoyed someone's company without an agenda, without a script. Their conversation slipped into memories of the past, the late nights at the office, the projects that nearly broke them, the way they'd fought over numbers and strategy like rivals on a battlefield. But underneath the teasing, something softer flickered. Respect, familiarity, maybe even regret. I never understood why you left, she said quietly, surprising herself with the question. Her voice had lost its edge, replaced by something more vulnerable. Nathan's smile faded just a little. I needed to breathe, Emily. Working with you was intense. You demanded perfection, and I wasn't sure I could give it any more. The words landed like snow on her skin, soft, cold, and true. Emily looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her fingertip. Perfection was the only thing that ever made sense to me. I know, he said, his tone gentle. But sometimes the best things in life happen when you stop trying to control them. She met his eyes, and the air between them changed again, quiet, electric, tender. He smiled, not the confident grin she remembered, but something warmer, more human. You're different tonight, he said softly. I like it. Before she could respond, the lights dimmed. The barista announced the cafe was closing early because of the storm. Emily blinked, realizing hours had passed. She wasn't ready for the night to end, and judging by the look in Nathan's eyes, neither was he. Outside, the storm had turned the city into a snow globe, quiet, glistening, and surreal. The streets were nearly empty, blanketed in white, each footstep leaving a delicate imprint that vanished within minutes. Nathan offered his arm as they stepped out of the cafe, and though Emily hesitated for a heartbeat, she took it. The wind nipped at her cheeks, but his arm was warm, steady. They walked in silence at first, the kind that didn't need filling. The snow muffled the world around them, so it felt like they were walking inside their own little universe. Christmas lights twinkled faintly from apartment windows, reflecting off the snow like scattered jewels. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" on an old piano. Nathan tilted his head toward her, a faint smile touching his lips. You know, he said, If someone had told me a week ago I'd be spending Christmas Eve walking through a blizzard with my old boss, I would have laughed. Emily smirked. If someone had told me I'd agree to a blind date, I would have fired them. He laughed, the sound carried away by the wind. Guess the universe has a sense of humor. As they reached the corner of her street, Emily slowed, staring up at the snow swirling under the lamplight. I don't do this, she said quietly. Do what? This. Walk around in the cold with someone who makes me forget about everything else. She met his eyes then, her expression open and unguarded. I don't even know what this is supposed to mean. Nathan's gaze softened. Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything yet. Maybe it's just two people trying not to be alone on Christmas. The simplicity of it disarmed her. For so long, her world had been built on structure, reason, goals, but here, under the falling snow, logic felt irrelevant. He reached up, brushing a snowflake from her hair, his fingers grazing her temple. The contact was barely there, but it sent warmth spiraling through her. Emily, he murmured, his voice low, hesitant. Yes. He smiled faintly. You're shivering. She hadn't realized until then how cold her hands were. Nathan took them in his, rubbing gently, his breath visible in the frosty air. Better. Almost, she whispered, and then, as if the night itself willed it, she leaned closer. The city around them blurred into soft light and snow. When their lips met, it wasn't a grand cinematic moment, it was quiet, tender, real. The kind of kiss that made time stop just long enough for two guarded hearts to find each other again. When they finally pulled apart, she laughed softly, half in disbelief. All this, because of a Christmas dare. Nathan grinned, snowflakes, caught in his lashes. Best dare I've ever taken. She smiled, her breath misting between them. Maybe the first one I've ever kept. And as they walked the final steps to her door, the snow kept falling, silent, endless, and bright, as if the world itself had been holding its breath for this moment.